Email after email, meeting after meeting. Communicating with clients can easily suck up every available minute. Client meetings quickly fill up your calendar, taking up all your time. And time? Well, time is often the single limiting factor for growth in a service business. What if you could skip the email, skip the meetings, and find a better way to communicate and save both you and your clients time? You're listening to Break the Ceiling, the show where we break down unconventional strategies you can use to save time, boost your profit, and increase your operational capacity. I'm your host, Susan Bowles. This month on the show, we're looking at unique ways to communicate with clients that opt out of meetings, of email, of conventional communication methods, and look for some alternatives. Today, we're talking about using Voxer with clients. It's primarily a voice messaging app that allows you to send short voice recordings back and forth. So if you remember back to the flip phone days, it's kind of a modern version of the push-to-talk Nokia phone, if you remember those. I'm going to talk to two different founders who both use Voxer to communicate with their coaching clients. We'll talk about how they're using it to replace both email and in-person meetings, and about the boundaries and processes they've put in place so clients know what to expect, but also so the technology doesn't become a distraction. Throughout this episode, pay close attention to how Voxer not only saves you time, but also saves your clients time. Opting out of meetings and finding a better way to communicate not only streamlines the way you deliver your service, but it streamlines the way your clients receive value too. Nancy Jane Smith is a licensed professional counselor and therapeutic coach who specializes in working with women living with high-functioning anxiety. Nancy used to work with her clients in much the way you'd expect. They'd book an appointment, come in to see her, talk through what's on their mind, and then book another appointment. It was the traditional one-to-one service model, the same that most therapists, coaches, and consultants use, and it has the same one-to-one service model constraints. Nancy was limited in how many clients she could take on and how much money her business could generate. Her clients were limited in how much support they could receive and when they could receive it. Nancy knew there had to be a better way, and that's when she found Voxer. Now, Nancy only sees her clients for a session once per month, but in between sessions, they have access to her guidance via Voxer. They can record a voice message for her at any time, and she'll respond Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Like I mentioned earlier, this certainly streamlines things for Nancy, and it's also easier for her to work with a full load of clients and still have time for business building activities. But also, it's just so much better for her clients.
One, it's hard for clients to have schedules. I kept having so many cancellations, and we have to reschedule because stuff comes up, and just for them to take time out of their day to come see me, and so I wanted something that was a little more accessible. And then the second thing was, a lot of times clients would have their scheduled appointment and they'd be like, everything's great. Everything's doing wonderful. I don't have, everything's great. Now, last week, that really sucked, but I don't want to go to last week because this week, everything's great. And so we would have these useless sessions frequently. Yeah. And so Voxer's so amazing because most of my clients Vox me every day. So they check in, they just do a check-in of what's happening, which gives me the chance to give them feedback that they may or may, but I can see things that they can't see. And so I think when I can give them feedback, they're like, oh, I never would have thought to bring that to session. So in that way, it's helpful because I can move them faster because I can see stuff that they can't see. And they're just kind of telling me their day as they're driving home from work, and they're just chatting on the phone. So there isn't, a coach sitting right across from them, giving them that pressure. It's just like they're telling a friend. And so that has helped just relax them. And so the stuff they tell me is I can move them through it quicker, if that makes sense.
No, that absolutely makes sense. Kind of instantaneous feedback. And you don't have to remember the thing that happened and remember to write it down so that when you have your meeting, you can remember to talk about that thing. When it just pops into your head, you can just say, hey, I thought this thing.
Yes.
Here you go.
Yeah. And then it's also been the unexpected benefit for me is it gives me time to respond. So if someone comes to me and they're like, this happened and I don't know what to do, I can be like, my initial response is crap. I don't know what to do either,
That is an excellent question.
Exactly. And so then I can be like, okay, take some time, figure it out. How do you want to approach this with them? And so instead of me just jumping in as I would in session, I can step back. And so therefore then the feedback I give them is better because I've had a chance to come at it from a more holistic perspective.
There are some major advantages to asynchronous communications, as Nancy points out. Being able to take the time to stop and fully consider actually allows you to deliver a better, more thoughtful response to clients' questions and requests, which means you're actually delivering a more valuable service. This format of communication allows for you to deliver the perfect response at just the right time. But there's also some potential for this kind of communication to go out of control quickly and be a bit of a distraction without some good boundaries in place. So setting clear expectations around how the tools will be used is critical. For Nancy, she set her boundaries that clients can record and send her a message at any time, but she'll only respond between the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m.
The only boundary I've set is if they send me, and so sometimes I do go past the 6 o'clock. If they send it to me before 6 o'clock, I respond to them. So
Okay.
It's within the same day. So even like last night I met, I had drinks with a friend at 4. And so when I got in the car at 7:30, I had a couple of Voxes that had come in at like 4:15. And so I Voxed them back and was very clear on saying, I know this is past the time, but it's because you got it in early. You got it in before 6. And so I respond. And so that before that wasn't always my rule. I think when I set it up, I was thinking, I'll hard stop at 6, even if I am, I won't go past 6. But what's happened is a lot of times when they're voxing me at the end of the day, they're talking about something that's going to happen the next day. And so when they go into work the next day, I want them to have my information.
That totally makes sense. So for you as the person who is responding to these, and they come in kind of throughout the day, however long they are you responding to them all together? Do you respond as they come in, as you have a few minutes? What does your workflow look like kind of administrating this system?
Well, so there's always a bunch of them when I start and end the day. So between 9 and 10, pretty much that's all I'm doing is answering Voxes. And then between 5 and 6, that's pretty much all I'm doing is answering Voxes. And then the rest of the day, there might be some that randomly come in. And so if I see them, I listen to them and I respond when I see them. But the ones that happen when I have to do a lot of them, so when I have a lot of clients that have Voxed me, I try to do them one at a time rather than listening as if I'm working with them in session. Rather than listening to all the Voxes and then replying to all the Voxes, I'll do one at a time. But when I start, when I thought of this experiment and was like, oh, let me try this, I thought, this is going to suck. I hate getting interrupted. It's just going to be really challenging.
Yeah, that was my first impression, because I know a lot of coaches are kind of moving to this more, using Voxer as a great tool to communicate with clients. And for me, I worry about getting interrupted all the time and all of a sudden having all of these requests that you didn't necessarily have before.
Right. And and that hasn't been annoying to me so far. What I like about it is the thing that's happening that I didn't really think of is it reminds me when I talk, I'm like, wow, I really do know what I'm talking about. So, which sounds terrible, but in the middle of the day, when I'm writing or I'm working on something, and then I have the chance to talk with a person about what it is I'm doing, and it's a 3-minute conversation. These aren't
right.
It's not like I'm hopping on the phone call for an hour. They're short, but they're enough for me to re-engage with my work in a different way and be like, wow, I just helped that person. And then, so it just kind of helps me. It really has been great for my workflow. And the part I like, which is unique to me, I would drive to an office. So I do because I do all my work in person, most of my work in person. And so this has been cool because I've moved to video. And so I'm doing more at home. but it's cut out that drive to my office and the hanging out at the office, waiting for clients. Like all that has gone away, which is just fabulous.
So did you find kind of giving them unlimited access to you ended up with do you get more communication than you would like at a weekly meeting? Volume wise, are you spending more time doing responding to Voxes than you would in meetings, or you're finding that you're getting only the really important stuff that you would have gotten in the meetings?
There are clients that, they'll Vox me on their way home. And so, and a Vox is 15 minutes long. That's the max it can go.
Don't cut them off.
And so I have a couple clients that will go to 15 minutes because they're just rambling on about telling stories. And so sometimes I will admit that can get a little much. And I will talk to them about that, to say, hey, can you just really edit out and talk about the stuff you really want me to be commenting on and what's really going on? Sometimes those stories are helpful, but sometimes they just get a little too much. And so I try to help guide them into what is helpful in our work to be hearing and what isn't helpful. And that was helpful to me. There was Heather Gray is a woman I talked with who was doing this in her practice. And she said, it's the same as if you were working with someone in your office or on video, you want to set boundaries and you want to teach them how to have these conversations. And so you may need to say, whoa, that don't Vox me when you've been drinking, or don't Vox me, when you're in the middle of the major crisis, like wait till you've calmed down a little bit and you can be a little more coherent. And so that has helped. It's helped me become a better coach because I can have those conversations with them, and having the conversations behind the phone, not in person, makes them a little easier to have.
Yeah, I can see that. So you've got boundaries around time frame, boundaries around, or at least training around what they should and should not be Voxing you. Are there other kind of boundaries or guidelines that you give them when you're either onboarding, stuff that you found that you didn't expect as a hurdle you kind of either had to train or jump over?
The biggest hurdle I found is building the trust, because they have to trust a lot to be willing to get on the phone and share what's going on with them. And so that's been by far the biggest challenge. And so one of the boundaries I put into place is to initially, when we have our first, because we have our first meeting, and that's a 90-minute session. And that's for me to like get their whole history and build a, camaraderie and that sort of thing. And then from that point on, I'll say, Vox me every day for the next week. And if they don't, I will check in and say, hey, that's this week we're doing every week. So can you, what's going on? So they can get into the habit of being like, oh, this is what I do now. I check in with Nancy. When I'm feeling wigged out, I check in with Nancy, because a lot of times I found clients were waiting until a crisis, waiting until their anxiety had gone through the roof before they reached out to me. But I need to talk to them when their anxiety isn't going through the roof, because that's when we can do the work to build up their inner resilience and their self-confidence.
Interesting. So do you have other communication channels that you offer as well? Can they email you? Can they, I don't know, send you a pigeon? Like Voxer's pretty much like, hey, this is the way that this is the communication channel. If you have a question, if you have something going on, Voxer is the place that you do this.
Yes, it's mostly Voxer is the place that you do this. I have a portal through my scheduling software that I use, and they can communicate with me. Clients really don't, but I will send. That's where I can send them worksheets that they can pull down, and they can also submit those worksheets to me after they've completed them. And so that's a place where we kind of can talk to each other, but and they can do messaging in there. They don't tend to do that. If we're booking, the thing I haven't quite figured out, as far as like streamlining and making it super slick, is when is the billing, and then having them set up their monthly appointment. And I need to them do that right away. So like we start working and they set up their monthly appointment, and they set up all 3, because I want them to work with me for 3 months at a time, all 3 appointments. Right now it's willy-nilly. So I have someone their month starts on the 17th and someone else's month starts on the 25th. And I'm constantly emailing to be like, oh, you got to set up your monthly appointment. And that needs to be fixed, because it's way too much work on my end. I'm down to make sure that I have their invoice and that sort of thing. And so I'm working on a system to decrease that.
The administration.
Yes.
The system.
Yeah. How to do that more easily, which I think if I had been a coach or someone who just worked online, and I'm always used to clients come into my office and they pay me there.
Come to your office,
and then we set up the next appointment. And so there wasn't this, oh, we got to set up an appointment and I'm not seeing you, is a new thing for me.
That makes sense. So given that this is a relatively new transition to Voxer and to more remote approaches, how, as the business owner, how has this affected how your business feels to run? Is it easier? Is it harder? Just different? What kind of impact did this transition have on you personally?
I think I've taken my business more seriously after I transitioned to this, just because it felt, I think I had just gotten into the rote pattern of go to work, sit for the hour. This is what you do. You take your payment, you do the next, like I had just bought into industry did and what everyone does in the industry. Yeah. And so this was like, oh, wait, I'm doing what's best for my clients. This works best for them and me. And it just kind of feels more authentic and more like I'm stepping into being an expert, that I know what works best. And I know for my clients, my particular high functioning anxiety, super busy, mostly introverted, don't want to let anyone know what's really going on clients, doing something on a phone is much more palpable to them than coming into the office and exposing their vulnerability for a full hour.
I get that. The introvert in me very much understands that feeling there. Yeah.
So that's one reason I really like it, is because I'm an introvert as well. And it was just, I don't have to be on. Yeah. I just have to be talking into a phone, and it just feels the energy is so different than when you're face to face with someone and you got to be all put together and that sort of stuff.
And do you find any pressure for yourself in terms of responding right away? Because that's always an issue for me when I see an email that comes in, or I have to have all of my notifications turned off. Yes. Because I will drop everything if a notification comes in, and that's where I find it very distracted. So my email, I don't have any little, unread email number badges on either my computer or my phone, because I find it so distracting. How have you managed that? Or maybe it's not an issue for you.
That is an issue for me.
Urgency. How do you manage the urgency to respond to people that you know are looking for help? How do you manage the urgency of your need to respond?
Yeah, most of the, whenever I see one, I'm like, I got to respond. I still have that. And then that is decreased over time, because every one of my clients is like, wow, you are so responsive. This is crazy how responsive you are. And so that has just helped me to be like, okay, they know they trust now that I'm going to get to them. I don't think they're ever like, well, it's been 2 hours. Why hasn't she responded? That hasn't happened. So I can give myself a little relaxation around that. But like I said, I do try. And when it hasn't been that bad. Like, my husband would probably say it's been annoying because I'll be like, oh, I got to do my Voxes, like we'll be in the middle of doing something. I'll be like, oh, wait, I got to go do my Voxes. And so, but that's what's cool too, is, we could take the day and I can still be working. And I'm not in my office, like I'm out and about, but I just have to have my phone and reply to the Voxes. And so I think that has been a benefit. But what I do is at 6:00 after I've cleared the deck, I turn off all my notifications.
Gotcha.
And then I turn it back on at 9, and I do it on the weekend. At Friday at 6, it's off, and it goes off until Monday at 9, because I just can't. It drives me too crazy.
It stresses me out. Like I had to take Slack off my phone because there were too many notifications.
Yeah.
Because I'll just drop everything and be like, oh, must respond, shiny thing.
Yes. And especially because I'll just be like, oh, I'll just see what they have to say. Yeah. And if it's urgent, but then they can see that you've listened.
That you saw it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then there you go. Then they're like, well, she heard it. Why hasn't she responded? Yeah. So I don't even go there. And that was a rule I was very strict, which is hard for me. I've been very strict on the 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And a lot of times, I'll have a 9 a.m. meeting. Like this morning I had a 9 a.m. meeting that went till 10:30. And so I didn't get back to my Voxers until 11. And a lot of them have said, I'm at work. I can't talk to you until lunch anyway. So it doesn't matter that you don't get to me, because I'm either going to talk to you at noon or I'm going to talk to you when I go home at 5. So that's helped me too, to recognize it's not, they're not, most of my clients are not sitting around waiting for me to respond.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
So I'm very intrigued by this, actually, in a way that I didn't expect to be. So how do you handle, say that you want to go on vacation for a week or whatever? Mm-hmm. Do you let your clients know that, hey, Voxer going to be off this week. I'm actually on vacation. I'm out. How do you, or do you just take Voxer and they just have Voxer and you do it while you're on vacation? What's your approach there for kind of a longer break than I'm just out of the office today?
Yeah. Well, I went, interestingly, my husband was in the hospital for, he has epilepsy and he had to have this procedure done, and he was in the hospital for a week, and I stopped all my clients except for my Voxers. And so he's in the hospital and I'm answering, and they knew he was in the hospital. They knew it was happening, but I was like, but it gave me a way to, in that instance, it gave me a way to get out of what we were doing. Like I needed a break and I could go out, and do my thing. But for vacations, then, so the week before he went to the hospital, we went away to the Smoky Mountains, and I just said to them, hey, I'm going to be out for 5 days. I'll put 5 days to the end of your month. So, we'll just extend your month by 5 days. And they were all like, okay, whatever. I don't, and then like at Christmas time, I'm going to tell them like, hey, I'm out for the time between Christmas and New Year's. So I'll give you an extra week, at the end, at the end of the month.
That makes sense. Any issues from them for that, or they were all pretty understanding? And
they're all really understanding. Yeah. And I also thought they've all been very understanding of that. And I also thought there would be, especially like when my husband was in the hospital and they all knew it, I thought they might be more hesitant to Vox, just because they'd be like, oh, I don't want to bother her, but they weren't, which was great, because I didn't want, I wanted them to keep going with the work. Yeah. And so, and they did that, and I was very clear in explaining to them that I want you to keep going with the work. I've been very honest with myself that I want to keep doing this, even though he's in the hospital, so and they did. So that was great. And that was a great example of that communication piece that, that I just find so much easier to do with the, without the seeing the other person's face.
Yeah. No, I can absolutely relate. My husband has Crohn's, so he's often like every once in a while, there's like a random week that we're in the hospital, or,
yes,
where sometimes that can be, it can be a all-consuming thing, but often, yeah, you just want, half hour to just step away and do something else, think about something else. And I love the idea that Voxer can give you that flexibility in a way that, I was still doing email. My husband was in the hospital for about a week this summer, completely unexpectedly. And, I let all my clients know, and like, hey, and pushing back meetings and moving stuff around. And then all you can do pretty much is email. Like I can respond to your email and fix your crisis. That's all I can do right now. But I love that Voxer allows you to do that, on your phone, where you don't have to pull out the computer and figure out if you have Wi-Fi and all of those other pieces that allows you to be a lot more flexible, which I think is interesting.
And it wasn't, I didn't have to, it was, most of my responses, a lot of times, the Voxers don't go any longer. Their Voxers are about 10 minutes at the longest. Like I said, I have that occasional 15-minute, but 10 minutes. And then my response is usually less than 5. So it's not like it's this, I don't have to be focused for an hour of listening to someone like I, would if I was still seeing clients. It's a much easier in and out type of thing.
Yeah, I can see that. Where you don't have to, it's nice to be able to I can see putting it in between meetings. Oh, my meeting ended up 10 minutes early. What do I do for 10 minutes? I'm going to pop in, I'll answer a Vox. Just take one off the list as I have a few minutes. I can see where that would be really helpful, and you can work it in. And as long as you have very clear boundaries around setting their expectations for your response, when it's going to happen, I can see where this can be really very flexible. And like you said, I can see how you can move stuff along a lot faster because people are talking to you every day instead of once a week, so you can continually move them to the next step.
Right, because when they come in when you have the hour session, they are deciding what's important and what's not important. So they're filtering out a lot of information to tell you the story. And when they're doing it daily, they don't have that filter as much. You get the whole picture in a very different way. And so it's so much easier to be like, there you did it great. That's exactly what we're talking about. Now here, yep, you got a little stuck. What do we need to do to regroup that? And you could talk about it. Whereas when they're coming in to tell me the story, a lot of times for a lot of my clients, they want to just tell me the pretty bow on top.
Yep.
And not give me the real picture. And so that's what I love about this is I'm in there with them in the mess. And then we get to the pretty bow on top, but I see that whole process. And so for the clients that just want to show me the pretty bow, this has been challenging for them and I think in a great way.
I think that would be really interesting because really, when you're meeting weekly or you're meeting monthly, or it's not as immediate. There's it really depends on the timing of the day. So if you're there and it's one of those days that it happens to be, everything happens to be great, it's really great. And if you happen to be there on a day where it's completely the other end of the spectrum, you get the other end of the spectrum. But the timing really matters when you're getting that filter of it's all at once versus it's happening as it's happening.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And the work I'm doing with my clients is I'm not wanting, because people will be like, oh, you're a therapist coach, like you want to go in the past and talk about their parents. And no, we're doing, we might do that in the 90-minute session that we do at the beginning. But the work we're doing is how do I do my life with anxiety? And so it's so much about coping skills and resilience and building real-time stuff. And so that's what I love about Voxer is it allows me to do that. So yeah, if I was doing traditional therapy where I had, I was hearing their life story and really digging into trauma and stuff, this might be a questionable way of working with people. But for really working in present time and building coping strategies, it is incredible. It is like, I have struggled to sell my services until this came along. And now I'm just like, everyone in the world should be using this all the time. It's amazing.
Well, I think it's interesting because it is, I can see where it would be very applicable for anything where you're working kind of one-on-one with a client in terms of just being able to more immediately respond to whatever it is that they are dealing with, whether that's, therapy and anxiety, or in my instance, I got a question about finance. Instead of sending me an email or, waiting for a meeting, this can be a really immediate way to say, oh, that's a great thought. Okay. And I can go do things based off of whatever it is that we're thinking in the moment. And I like that immediacy, which intrigues me, because I really, when we set this up, I was a little skeptical about Voxer, and because it feels like it's one of those things where it could just quickly get out of control, which I think it probably can if you don't have very clear boundaries around how you're using Voxer and when you're using Voxer and all of those boundaries that we talked about. I think within the boundaries, I love the idea that you can move so much faster and get more impact per day than you would otherwise.
Yeah, because I had a client who was a regular client. She came in once a month for an hour, and then she wanted to move to Voxer. And we've been doing this for 3 months, and she's like, I have learned more in the past 3 months than in the 2 years of working with you, coming in once a month. Like, this is incredible. And so that it's been, my clients have been saying amazing things, not just me saying them, and they're all re-upping.
In episode 12, you heard from business coach Ashley Gartland about how she had found a more streamlined way to work with clients using project intensives. But that's not the only way Ashley is streaming her one-to-one client services. Like Nancy, Ashley is also using Voxer to save time, boost profit, and create really exceptional ongoing client experiences. Ashley was looking for a way to keep working with clients who continued to want her support, but weren't really looking for a lighter retainer version of the in-depth coaching they just experienced with her.
So with my regular client sessions, I have a 6-month coaching partnership where we are meeting 3 times a month and we are doing calls. And so it's very immersive, it's very hands-on. And what I was finding was after that, I had clients who were wanting to continue, but didn't necessarily feel like they needed so many calls or even any calls at all. And so I had a series of clients who came back to me and said, like, I want to continue working together, but what else do you have? Like the kind of retainer thing wasn't very appealing to them, where we would just do, a couple calls or like take them down to a few less calls than we were doing before. And so what I first started doing was offering an email only coaching offer. And it's something that I had in the back of my mind for probably years, that I love communicating via writing, and I wanted to provide them with some accountability and just to check in and a little bit of like light coaching. And that's kind of what they were asking for. And so I tested that out with 3 different clients, and we set up a system behind the scenes in my business to make it work really well. And it worked fine. Like, there was nothing wrong with it, but I wasn't in love with it. And I didn't feel like my clients were getting the kind of benefit that I wanted them to get. It didn't feel intimate enough. It didn't feel personalized enough because it was automated. And so, like, the email was automated, not my responses, obviously. And so I decided to put that one on the back burner, and I started thinking about like what else I would want to do with my clients. And I had been using Voxer, which is, a voice memo app, and with my team and with a mastermind group that I was part of. And I loved it. I loved how flexible it was. I loved that it was like in the moment support. And I love that you were talking and not writing, because it was really quick to just message back and forth with people. And so I had some reservations about rolling it out with clients, mostly that I just didn't know what that would look like capacity wise and how they would be using it. But I decided to beta test it with 3 different clients, kind of like I did with the email offer. So when 3 clients wrapped up their packages, I let them know it was available to them. They all jumped on it and were ready to go. And we started that in the summer, and it worked so well, not just for me, but also for them. And so it's been something that I've continued to offer to clients who are continuing now. And I think I now have about 8 people doing it. And I think my capacity is going to be around 10, but we'll see over time.
And so what kind of boundaries have you set in place around, how they can communicate with you or how you respond to them?
Yeah, that was really important for me, because what I didn't want to do was spend all day messaging back and forth with people on Voxer. Like that wasn't going to be a good use of my time, right? And so one thing that I'll say is I only offer this to people who are continuing with me. So I know we have a really good foundation. I know their communication style. I also know where they're at in their business, and I can sense like what's going to be a good fit for them. Like some people will continue with another like 6-month package and do the high touch, and that's where they're at. But the people who are starting to phase out of that need can do the Voxer coaching partnership. And so I know what their needs are, and they do too. And so it like has to be a good fit for where they're at in their business and where they're looking for support. So that's really important first off. And then I do communicate some boundaries up front. I let them know that I will be available to respond to messages Monday through Friday from about 9 till 3. And if they message outside of those hours, I will get back to them in the next day. And if they message over the weekend, like they're welcome to message me in the moment. I want them doing that, but they know that the response won't come until Monday. Because I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to be Voxering with people all weekend when I was spending time with my family.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I had those boundaries in place. And I also gave myself a nice buffer of I will respond to messages within 48 hours. It's the same thing I do with my coaching clients who I do calls with, and we message back and forth. I just use that same boundary because I find that that's helpful in busy seasons in my business, but most of the time I'm able to get back to them in like, the same day.
And do you have anybody that has an issue with the 48-hour response time, that they're expecting it faster or slower, or they just accept the boundary that is, here's the response, here's how it works, and that's fine? Did you have any pushback?
No, it's been I think I tend to attract really respectful clients who are also trying to enjoy more margins in their own life. And so they don't want to be messaging all the time either. So I haven't had one single question or complaint around it. In fact, I have clients who will message me on like Friday evening and the start of the message literally says, I know you won't get to this till Monday, but I just wanted to message this while it was like fresh on my mind. So I know the response is coming and don't feel a need to rush it.
I love that. And I have found, I think with a lot of people, that the more boundaries you put in place, the more respectful, like nobody seems to have an issue with boundaries that are explicit, that you're clearly stating this is a boundary, this is the expectation about how it's going to work. And I think sometimes in our own heads, we expect there to be more pushback than there actually is. And just the fact of clearly communicating the expectations sort of negates all of that.
Yeah, it goes so far. And then the other like really clear communication I've had around this is that if they have a need for like a deeper dive, if they have like, I've had clients who are launching something, or maybe they want to set their new year goals, or, if they want to do something that's a little bit more hands-on and a longer conversation, the people who do the Voxer coaching partnership are welcome to book an additional call if they want to. And I've only had 2 clients do that for very specific things, but that also eliminates a ton of back and forth if we're going into something really that requires an in-depth conversation.
That makes sense. And I love the idea that the kind of the concept for the Voxer coaching plan really came out of your clients wanting to minimize meetings. It's interesting because, the topic, the way I'm approaching this is from the operational capacity of our own business, from a systems perspective, administrating how you work with clients. But I love the fact that we also need to be really cognizant of the fact that it's a big time commitment, not just for us, but also for our clients. Those meetings that we're having should be functional. And once you get past that in-depth work, sometimes you don't need it, and they don't need it either.
Yeah,
I love that concept.
Yeah, I've seen some of my clients really leverage this. Like I have a client who calls while she's driving carpool to pick her kids up. So I hear from her frequently, and it's always around the same time of the day. Like she's using her time really wisely. She just pops her earbuds in, updates me on her business, lets me know where she needs feedback, and I can respond, same thing, like really flexible on my own time to her needs. And she doesn't have to worry about fitting in a call somewhere that might take her out of something else in her business. So I love it for that reason.
Yeah. And I think you can also be more both as the business owner, more in the moment about your questions, and that you can just ask it. You don't have to like find a time and get both of your schedules and send the link. And then by the time you actually have the meeting, you sort of either forget or it's not an issue anymore. And then on your end, you have the same challenges, but you can address the need in the moment in a more immediate way that I would expect it kind of feels a little bit higher touch, even though it's actually, less, you're not scheduling a meeting, you're not spending an hour with them. Do you find that there is from the client perspective, do they feel like you are more responsive or immediate or getting different benefits from that style of coaching versus in-person coaching?
I think it does feel like it accelerates things for them, right? Because they can message right away. And my clients can too via a Trello board that we have when we're doing a long-term coaching partnership. But there's something about the speaking of the question and like them walking me through what's really going on in real time and me being able to respond very quickly that just it does create a lot more intimacy.
I love that. So when you were transitioning clients from the old method to the new method, did you run into any kind of challenges, or this was just really well received and for your, from your standpoint, it operates really well, or did you run into some kinds of issues when you were kind of transitioning that?
Yeah, I think I just needed to, there haven't been any really big challenges with it. I think one thing has been introducing them to the new tech because a lot of my clients didn't use Voxer before and didn't even know what it was. And so like number one, explaining it and telling them how it works is really important. And then when I onboard them into it, I show them how to use it, or I send them an onboarding email saying this is how it's going to work and here's where our communication is going to happen, and then outline all those boundaries again. So that's been helpful in kind of getting them over the hurdle to learning Voxer. And again, it's like super simple once you're in there. I feel like my 5-year-old could do it. But if you're not familiar with it up front, it helps ease any concerns they have about switching how we're communicating. So that was a challenge. And then, the one thing that I've noticed with it from my perspective is that people will use it for sometimes they'll message about just one little thing. It'll be a quick 1-minute message, but sometimes people like to check in, once a week or so with Voxer, and they'll highlight a couple of different things. So for me, it's really important for me to have a piece of paper out and be able to take some notes so that when I'm responding, I can remember all the things that they said, which works just perfectly fine. It just means that I have to have my notebook out.
And do you find that they have any, is there any resistance to, one more piece of tech or one more app to the communication channel, or not really? And they just, this is what it is. This is how this works. And they download the app and no problem.
Yeah, they haven't had any problems. And I think it's because the platform is so intuitive and so easy and it's free. Like there's not a lot of barriers to entry for them. And also in terms of adding one more thing, we're also subtracting something. So we're no longer communicating via our Trello board. We're no longer doing, the calls for our 6-month partnership. They're moving into this instead. And so instead of adding something else, we're subtracting something first and then adding this in.
So is this taking this, when they are on the Voxer coaching plan, this is the only communication method that's available?
Yep.
Okay.
So simple.
Okay. So how, from your perspective, has the Voxer coaching approached, how has it felt to you from an operational standpoint in terms of actually administering this, finding times to respond to everybody? Do you batch respond? How do you approach that from your end?
Yeah, well, I definitely batch respond. I found that that's helpful with all of my client communication to be in the mindset of I'm responding to my client messages right now. And so I'll do that with my clients who are in the Trello board and doing the 6-month partnership. And then I'll go through the Voxer coaching partnership messages that I've received for the day and respond to those. And that's just something that I do. I have it set in my schedule. I know when it's going to happen. And that's been really easy for me to tackle. What I've really loved that it's done for my operational capacity is that it's allowed me to essentially double my client load without doubling my call time or my workload. And that was something that I was feeling really limited by. I serve 8 clients a month with my long-term coaching partnership. And if people were continuing, I could still serve those same 8 clients a month because they were just filling calls differently. But now I can serve, another 10 or so clients a month in the Voxer coaching partnership without worrying about how that fits into my call calendar. And that's been really helpful for me because I really wanted to serve more people, but I still wanted it to be really high touch.
For both Nancy and Ashley, they approached this technology with very clear boundaries around how they were willing to communicate. They trained their clients on how to use the app and clearly defined their response times, availability, and then continually reinforce those boundaries that they set in place. Voxer is a tool that, without a clear idea of how you're going to use it, can quickly become a distraction for you and your workflow. But with firm boundaries and clear expectations, Nancy and Ashley both harness the technology to minimize client emails, eliminate client meetings, and deliver more immediate and valuable support to get their clients results faster than they would have been able to using a traditional recurring client meeting format. We usually look at improving efficiency and streamlining through the lens of our own business, like reducing client meetings so we can remove that limit on our time and create the capacity to serve more clients. But when we start thinking about new ways to deliver service, it forces us to think about how to deliver the same value in a different way, and that often results in a better experience for our clients. The same value in less time is better for everyone. Clients don't want to waste their time in meetings or with back and forth emails any more than we do. So when we can develop new strategies to make the delivery of our service even more efficient, everyone wins. If you're enjoying the conversations we're having about unconventional ways to manage client meetings, and you're not sold on the idea that meetings are inevitable, make sure you tune in next week. I'll be talking to Parker Stevenson from Evolved Finance about how he transitioned from regular monthly client meetings to recorded Loom videos and eventually transitioning into group office hours. If you want to connect with Ashley, check out her website at ashleygartland.com and get in touch with Nancy at live-happier.com. Growth is only hard when your business isn't built for it. And unfortunately, the way you assume your business should be built probably doesn't leave much room for growth. Your calendar is full, your pipeline's empty, your systems are backlogged, and you're up to your eyeballs just trying to keep it all together. I help service entrepreneurs like you boost their profit, save time, and configure their businesses for growth by carefully examining all those have-tos and shoulds that make up the way you've built your business. Together, we find ways to ease your burden while continuing to deliver incredible experiences to your clients. As your growth advisor, I'll show you that you don't have to sacrifice your work-life balance, your client satisfaction, or your quality of work to have a business that's built to grow. You just have to build it differently. It all starts with getting clear on your money and your foundational systems. I'll help you identify your profit centers, define processes that drive revenue, and create automations that fuel your cash flow. I'd love to talk with you about how you can jumpstart your revenue growth by doing less. To get started, shoot me an email at susan@scalespark.co. From there, we'll hop on the phone and see if you're a good fit for a custom growth blueprint. Again, reach out to susan@scalespark.co. I'd love to help you break through the ceiling. Break the Ceiling is produced by Yellow House Media. Our production coordinator is Sean McMullen. This episode was edited by Marty Seefeld, with production assistance by Kristen Runvik, and our theme music is Feel So Fly by the Unders.